Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a warm-up story in which our OP was dissatisfied with the service and took petty revenge at the end. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You enjoy that reasonable tip. I've got something even better. One of my favorite things is going alone to a bar after a long day. I'll fire up the Kindle, get a happy hour beer or two, and enjoy being solitary while surrounded by people. Well, a few days ago, I went to a pretty well-known gastropub-type place in my area, one that's beloved by tourists and locals alike. I arrived at 5:30 on a Monday, so the bar area was only about three-quarters filled. Eagerly anticipating a well-deserved beer, I made eye contact with the bartender. She looked away and completed some other tasks. Not a huge deal, maybe she had other people who needed checks. It took her about 4 to 5 minutes to get over to me, which again isn't the biggest deal, but the bar wasn't busy. So when she finally came over, I asked for a beer. Without pausing, she said, "We're not serving that yet," turned and walked away. Now, to be fair, I had read the menu wrong. They offer certain beers when other kegs have been kicked, but she literally walked away without giving me a chance to correct myself. She came back probably 1 to 2 minutes later, but the rest of the visit was much of the same. I was ready to order food for about 15 minutes before she would acknowledge me, and asking her for anything seemed to be a burden far too heavy for her to handle. When it came time for settling my bill, I ran through a familiar debate with myself. I generally tip very generously since I was a server once myself, but in situations like this, I'm torn. I think tipping poorly sometimes reinforces their attitude. My customers are a-holes who don't tip, so there's no point in giving them decent service and the like. But then tipping them a decent amount for a bad experience doesn't make sense either. So this time I took out my phone and calculated 14% to the penny. Just under the acceptable 15%, but not low enough to get her panties in a bunch. But wait, there's more. As I was smugly writing my 14% tip, I noticed that the pen I was writing with was quite nice by restaurant standards. Anyone who's ever worked in the service industry knows that you never use anything better than the cheapest Bic, as they'll get stolen the minute you walk away. Well, I thought I would teach this woman a little lesson to go with her adequate tip, and I'm the new owner of a used ink pen. Poor service, when it's due to bad attitude, deserves the dreaded penny tip. It gets the point across that you remembered to tip, and thought so little of their service that they deserve that Lincoln you scored in the parking lot. Also, I would have replaced pen with non-functional dried-up cheapy pen. And our second story. The robbery. Years ago, I used to work in convenience stores. A little over 4 years ago, I was working a Sunday morning shift after closing the night before. Not at all uncommon, but Sunday mornings aren't usually busy, especially when it's Father's Day. I'm behind the counter counting cigarettes, tired as F, when I see somebody walking toward the front door from around the back of the building. He was wearing heavy denim jeans, a black hooded sweatshirt, and a scarf. In July. As he neared the door, he pulled the scarf up over his face. At this point, I had a pretty good idea what was about to happen. I quickly popped my till open, dropped my cash in the safe, and hit the panic button. Wannabe robber walked in and came straight to the counter. He had his right hand in his sweatshirt pocket with his index finger extended so it looked like he might have a gun. WR. Give me the money. Me. No. Clearly not prepared for that response, he pondered me for a few seconds and walked around the side of the counter to try again. As soon as he started moving, I rested my hand on the handle of the aluminum baseball bat that we had next to the safe. WR. I said, give me the money. Me. No. WR. Me. That's not even a gun. At that point, WR realized a few things. First, he wasn't going to get any money. Second, this had taken far longer than he thought it would, and someone was likely to show up soon. And third, he was now standing in front of somebody much bigger than him who had a baseball bat that he'd just tried to rob. So WR ran. The police had still not called or shown up at this point, or in the 45 minutes between the attempted robbery and my area supervisor coming by for the previous day's deposit. I called the police, non-emergency, and asked if anyone was going to respond to our panic alarm. They never received the alert. Apparently, the company was really bad about periodic testing, and the battery in the panic fob had been dead for quite some time. So it's a damn good thing it wasn't an actual emergency. They eventually showed up, reviewed the cameras, took my statement, etc. I worked too damn hard to let some stupid punk come into my store and get money. Come get a soul-sucking job like the rest of us, mother effer. And our last story. Terrible boss gets his comeuppance. Setting: high-volume independent tire shop in northern New England circa 2012. We'll call it 123 Tire. Target: evil general manager. We'll call him Jay. Aggrieved parties: basically everybody that worked there at the time, but mainly myself and the receptionist. We'll call her Ruth. Backstory: so Jay had been the GM of 123 Tire since he got the previous GM fired in 2004. He is a complete narcissist who believed he could do no wrong. And if you didn't agree with him, God help you. Over the years, Jay had done a number of illegal things. For example, he was always very physical with his employees. One time, he was wrestling with another salesman. This was commonplace and unavoidable if you valued your job. And the salesman, we'll call him Paul, took a bad fall and broke his knee. In order to avoid the ire of the owner, we'll call him Lou, Jay immediately clocked Paul out and told him to go to the hospital. He also told Paul to use his own insurance and that the company would pay the deductible in order to avoid a messy workers' comp claim. Paul did as he was told and kept his job, but his knee was never the same, and he ended up addicted to opioids thanks to Jay's actions. Jay also had an affinity for the ladies. Now, I must mention here that Jay is an ultra-conservative Christian father of 11 children who believes that a woman's place is uneducated, barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That being said, several female receptionists came and went over the years with only Ruth sticking around because she needed the money and begrudgingly accepted the regular harassment. When he wasn't behaving inappropriately with every lady that walked in the door, he was behaving inappropriately with every other employee. Want to leave early on a slow day? Wrestle the biggest guy in the shop for it. Jay was big on wrestling. I suspected Jay may have also been wrestling with his daughters, but couldn't prove it. The guy was a real creep. Big guy isn't in that day? Buy him a pizza. Trying to have lunch? Expect Jay to throw food at you. Want to schedule a vacation? Tough. He'll let you know the week before if you can take it. He was a complete child, and I put up with him for 6 long years because I couldn't let him win. The setting. It was the summer of 2012, and Ruth and I had had enough. Jay was completely out of control as usual, now telling me, a Latino, that if Obama won re-election, that he'd make my work-life hell come November. Ruth was going through a divorce, and he was trying to move in on her. For the record, Ruth hated Jay's guts. It was time to hit him where it hurt. Ruth was ready to drop a lawsuit for sexual harassment on Jay and 123 Tire, and I was ready to drop one for constructive discharge. Now, suing an employer doesn't exactly look good on one's CV, but we were both at wit's end. The revenge. Ruth and I decided one evening that Jay's ultra-conservative values must be shared by his wife and family. As he was always working, his wife must be the one who goes to the mailbox every day. I created a throwaway email and got him a Bill Me Later subscription to Hustler Magazine and Playboy and Penthouse. Fast forward a couple of weeks and he comes in looking like death warmed over. Turns out Mrs. J didn't appreciate his new taste in reading material, and now he's living in a motel in the next town over. Now, he's not saying that his wife kicked him out. He's far too much of a narcissist for that, but I could put 2 and 2 together. He's decided that he's done with his wife and 11 children and that he's going to start a new life with Ruth. After all, her divorce is going to be finalized at the end of the week. It was at this point that Lou's sister, co-owner of 123 Tire and not a big fan of Jay, we'll call her Liz, overheard him talking to Liz in a less than business appropriate manner. Liz later took Ruth aside and got the straight poop on what had been happening for the last several years. And that was that. The next morning, Lou called Jay to his office and was far kinder than I would have been. Jay was to lose his title of GM and go to work in another 123 Tire location an hour away until the end of the year. Beginning in 2013, Jay would need to find other employment. Jay was also not to contact the location that he'd overseen and worked in for years. Also, the location that Jay was relocated to added an hour to his already hour-long commute. I suspect that Lou also encouraged Jay to reconcile with his wife, which Jay did. Epilogue. Jay ended his employment with 123 Tire in January of 2013 and never suspected any involvement from me. In fact, to this day, he stays in occasional contact with me. He went on to work for another tire store, this one a corporate chain, as a store manager, put his house on the market, bought a new one closer to his new employer and everything. A year later, he was fired after bringing a 7-figure lawsuit on them. They settled out of court, and he moved back to the house he was in before, as it hadn't sold. Jay's next job was 5 minutes from his home, and his new boss was the guy that Jay had gotten fired back in 2004. That one lasted a couple of years, until Jay gave up on finding employment in the area and moved himself and the whole family to the Midwest sometime around 2016. Now in the Midwest, Jay has been unable to keep a job in the car business for more than a year, and as soon as each of his kids turns 18, they seem to move right back to the area they grew up in. His New England home sold in 2019 for less than he bought it for. Ruth still works for 123 Tire and is very happy there now. The icing on the cake? In early 2021, I finally left my job at 123 Tire, sold my house, and became a full-time RVer. I've seen 47 U.S. states, including the Midwestern state and town that Jay now resides in. I looked him up when I got there, and he came to see me after he got out of work in my new RV. He said, "Boy, you must really think something of me to look up and want to see me all the way out here. If you only knew the half of it." Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.